Winter can feel peaceful. It is calm, quiet, and almost magical. But the truth is that some of the strangest disappearances and unexplained events in history happened when the world was covered in ice. These are real stories of explorers, hikers, scientists, and entire teams who set out on winter journeys and vanished or came back with experiences no one can fully explain. In February 1973, a group of 7 Soviet geologists from the Institute of Geology of the USSR Academy of Sciences set out into the remote Ural Mountains to study mineral deposits. They were well trained in extreme cold, used standardized expedition gear, and checked in regularly through radio. Their camp was located deep in the Siberian winter wilderness. When their scheduled radio reports suddenly stopped, a search team was sent. The geologists' camp looked abandoned in extreme haste. Their tent was still standing but was open, and tools were scattered outside. A cooking pot of frozen soup sat beside the fire pit. Nothing was packed. All signs pointed to the team leaving suddenly. Over the next several days, searchers found the bodies of the geologists at various distances from camp. Most had passed away from exposure. The Soviet investigation concluded that they fled from, quote, an unknown immediate threat, but the exact cause was never determined. There were no animal tracks, no avalanche damage, no signs of violence, and the temperature that night was dangerously low, so fleeing the tent without gear made no logical sense. To this day, Russian researchers still use the case as an example of unexplained panic behavior during winter expeditions. In 1981, photographer Carl McCunn hired a bush plane to drop him off in a remote area of northern Alaska. His plan was to spend several months living alone in the wilderness, documenting animal behavior. McCunn was experienced outdoors and prepared for the freezing temperatures. There was only one problem. He assumed the pilot would return for him, but he never confirmed the date. As winter set in, McCunn realized he was stranded. In his diary, later found beside his campsite, he wrote that he saw a rescue plane fly overhead. He tried to signal, but he accidentally made the wrong hand gesture. Instead of waving both arms to signal distress, he waved one arm. That gesture means everything is fine, and no more planes came by. By November, food ran out. His diary described his slow physical decline, the sub-zero temperatures, and his mental struggle. Search teams later found his final campsite empty, and following footprints in the snow, they found his body a short distance away. What puzzles investigators is what happened in his final days. His diary ends calmly, but the condition of the site suggested he had moved around much more than expected. His story is one of the most haunting examples of a small mistake leading to a tragic and mysterious winter end. In the winter of 1914, a small scientific team traveled across frozen Lake Baikal in Siberia. Their mission was to take depth measurements across the lake, which is the deepest freshwater lake in the world. The ice that year was unusually clear and solid, which made travel easier. The team was last seen at a remote station on the eastern shore. Days later, another team traveling the same route found abandoned sleds and equipment scattered across the ice. The sled dogs were still tied up and alive. The ice was unbroken. There were no signs of a storm. There were no footprints leading away. The scientists were simply gone. The only clue was a journal found near the equipment. The final entry mentioned deep groaning sounds beneath the ice that kept growing louder each night. The team believed the lake was shifting, but the ice remained stable. To this day, none of the scientists were ever found. Although this event did not take place in the snow, it did happen during the southern hemisphere winter and remains one of the strangest maritime mysteries on record. In April 2007, 3 experienced sailors set out from Australia on a routine trip aboard their boat, the Kaz 2. They were seen leaving harbor and everything looked normal, but several days later, a helicopter spotted the vessel drifting. When authorities boarded the boat, they found hot food still on the table, a laptop was opened, jackets were neatly hung up, the engine was running, but the 3 sailors were gone. The conditions were calm, none of the men had radioed for help, their life jackets were still on board. Investigation suggested they were all on deck when something happened, but what could make 3 adults vanish instantly without disturbing anything? Winter waves were mild that day, they were only about 1 meter high. To this day, no trace of the men has ever been found. The Kaz 2 remains one of the most real and baffling maritime disappearances in modern history. In October 1972, a plane carrying a rugby team and their families crashed in the Andes. The survivors found themselves stranded at over 12,000 feet, surrounded by snow and ice. Temperatures fell well below freezing each night. The group managed to build shelter from the wreckage and ration what little food they had. They dug tunnels in the snow to stay warm and used metal parts to melt water. After several days, they heard on a small radio that the search for them had been called off. But still, they refused to quit. Eventually, 2 survivors decided to hike across the mountains for help. Their journey took 10 days across brutal winter terrain. They crossed frozen glaciers, climbed steep ridges, and slept in the open cold. On the 10th day, they found a Chilean mule driver. When he saw them across the river, they yelled one word: help. Rescuers returned to the crash site and saved the remaining survivors. Everything about their survival is fully documented and real, and the conditions they endured remain some of the harshest winter expedition feats ever recorded. And it's not like they meant to go on some winter expedition. In 1981, 19-year-old Barbara Cotton was walking home in Williston, North Dakota during a late-night snowstorm. She was last seen by a friend who watched her walk toward the river path. Even though it was cold, Barbara was familiar with the area. When she did not return home, her mother reported her missing. Search teams found a single line of footprints leading toward the river, but after about 100 feet, the footprints stopped. The snow was untouched around them. No body was ever found, no clothing, no belongings. The path she took was familiar and not close enough to the water for her to slip. Dogs brought to the scene tracked her scent along the trail, and then it vanished as if the trail had just been wiped clean. In the winter of 1952, a Swedish Air Force DC-3 took off on a classified intelligence mission over the Baltic Sea. The crew of 8 men was collecting Soviet radio signals, a routine Cold War task. Conditions were clear and the aircraft checked in as scheduled until just before noon, when Swedish operators received a sudden SOS. The transmission cut off mid-message and no further contact was made. Rescue planes launched immediately but found nothing. Large sections of the Baltic were frozen, yet there were no crash marks on the ice, no debris, and no oil slick. Days passed with no trace of the aircraft, and then the Soviet Union announced they had shot down a Swedish plane but refused to reveal where. Sweden had no proof until a second Swedish search plane was fired upon. That plane survived. The DC-3 did not. For 50 years, the disappearance remained one of Scandinavia's coldest mysteries. Then, in 2003, a deep-sea survey found the wreck at the bottom of the Baltic. It only made things stranger. The fuselage was riddled with holes, but the bodies of the 8 crew members were missing. Not one human remained inside. In January 1976, a German cross-country skier named Alfred Lohr was on a winter training trip in the Black Forest region. He was experienced and prepared for cold weather. At some point during his route, a sudden snowstorm hit. When he failed to return, search teams followed his ski tracks. The trail continued normally for several miles until the tracks suddenly showed he removed his skis and began walking. The footprints continued for about a mile before they began forming near-perfect circles in the snow. Experts estimated he walked in these circles for hours. There were no signs of fall or injury. The circular pattern suggested confusion or disorientation, but he was not in a blizzard severe enough to cause whiteout conditions. His body was found nearby. The autopsy could not determine why he removed his skis or why he walked in circles. Hypothermia can cause strange behavior, but Alfred was healthy, well-fed, and only a short distance from shelter. His death is considered suspicious and unexplained to this day. Sir John Franklin led an Arctic expedition in 1845 to chart the Northwest Passage. His 2 ships, HMS Terror and HMS Erebus, were state-of-the-art for the time and carried 129 men. When they entered frozen waters near King William Island, the ice closed in. The ships became stuck. The crew abandoned them and attempted to march south. Many died from starvation, exposure, and possibly lead poisoning from canned food. For more than a century, Inuit hunters told stories of mysterious sounds coming from the ice. They reported seeing men wandering in tattered uniforms long after the crew was believed to be dead. Some said they heard tapping, like someone signaling from beneath the frozen surface. The wrecks were finally discovered in 2014 and 2016. Both ships were found in surprisingly good condition. Researchers still cannot fully explain how they ended up miles from their last recorded location, or why some crew members left personal items behind that they likely would have needed. Even today, historians believe the full truth of what happened during that winter march is still missing. In May 1928, during Arctic winter conditions, Italian explorer Umberto Nobile led an airship called the Italia on a scientific mission to the North Pole. They reached the pole successfully, but during the return flight, the Blimp was caught in a storm and crashed onto the ice. The surviving crew managed to set up a camp known as the Red Tent because of the color of its fabric. For weeks, they sent radio messages describing freezing conditions, polar bears approaching at night, and temperatures dropping far below zero. One message stood out. A radio operator claimed the snow around the camp began to glow faintly at night. Scientists have suggested this might have been a rare optical phenomenon caused by ice crystals, but no one can confirm it for sure. Rescue attempts were delayed because severe winter storms kept grounding search parties. By the time help arrived, some crew members had died and others had vanished during earlier attempts to walk for help. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. It is definitely true that the winter and the cold is no joke. Thanks so much for checking out this video. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.